I was sitting in my kitchen, same old oak table, same cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the clock ticking over the stove. At 62, I'd grown used to silence. Ever since Linda passed away, the quiet had become both a companion and a curse. You learn to live with it. Some days you welcome it, other days you'd trade anything for a little noise. That afternoon, though, the silence broke with the sound of tires on the driveway and the unmistakable slam of a car door. I knew that sound, too sharp, too quick. It was Olivia. My daughter had a way of arriving like a storm, beautiful, powerful, but always leaving something wrecked behind. I glanced toward the fridge. There they were, Ethan's drawing of a rocket ship and Lily's stick-figure family portrait with Grandpa scribbled under my name in purple crayon. I smiled, but it was short-lived, because if Olivia was here, it wasn't for a visit. It was never just a visit. The doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. Not once, not twice. 3 times the way she always rang when she wanted something. I stood, braced myself, and opened the door. There she was, Olivia. My little girl, now 34, standing in designer heels that probably cost more than my first car. She had that smile plastered on, the one that never quite reached her eyes anymore, and behind her, looming like a shadow, was Ryan, her husband, my son-in-law in name only. I'd never liked him, not once. "Dad," she said, her voice just a little too sweet. She leaned in for a hug that lasted 1 second too long, the kind that felt less like affection and more like a transaction. I let her hug me anyway because that's what fathers do. But the second she pulled away, Ryan brushed past without so much as a hello. Straight into my living room, like he owned the place. "Nice chair," he said, lowering himself into my leather recliner, my spot, the one where I sat every night with my bourbon and the TV remote. He leaned back like a king on a throne, picked up the crystal decanter and poured himself a drink. My drink. He didn't ask. He never did. I felt my jaw tighten, the way it always did when he was around. I reminded myself to count to 10, an old anger management trick. 1, 2, 3, but by 5 I was already boiling. Olivia sat down on the edge of the sofa, adjusting the strap of her handbag. It was the same bag I'd bought her last Christmas, $5,000 she swore she'd pay me back for. I hadn't seen a dime. She touched the pearl necklace at her throat, another gift from me like it was some kind of talisman. I knew that move. She always fiddled with it when she was about to ask for something. "Dad," she began, her voice shaky but rehearsed. "We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. Here it comes." Ryan set his glass down on the table with a heavy clink, leaned forward, and spread a stack of papers across the surface like he was running a board meeting. He looked at me, smug, confident. "We need 800,000 by tomorrow. 800,000, not 80, not 100, $800,000. Like he was asking me to grab milk from the store. The room tilted slightly, that old migraine starting to throb just behind my left eye. I pressed my fingers against the mantel, tried to steady myself. "Tomorrow," I repeated, my voice flatter than I intended. Ryan shrugged. "It's urgent, and really, for someone with your assets, it's not that much. Pocket change, right? Pocket change." The words hung in the air like an insult. Olivia chimed in quickly, her eyes darting between us. "Daddy, please, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. You've always said family comes first, and we're family." Family. I almost laughed. I looked at her, my daughter who once held my hand crossing the street, who once begged me to push her higher on the swings, who once whispered she wanted to grow up to be just like Mom. And now, she sat in front of me begging not for love, not for time, but for money, always money. "What happened to the house?" I asked quietly. "The down payment I gave you, the money for Ryan's startups, the tuition for the kids." Ryan waved a dismissive hand. "That's ancient history, market corrections, temporary setbacks. This is different. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can't miss it." I stared at him. What kind of opportunity needs $800,000 overnight? He smirked, but I caught it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. "It's complicated. Let's just say we owe some people, serious people." There it was, the threat unspoken but heavy as a hammer. Olivia leaned forward, her hand brushing mine, soft and manipulative all at once. "Daddy, please. If Mom were still alive, she wouldn't hesitate. She'd help us." And there it was again, the knife twisted, the memory of Linda weaponized, my late wife turned into a bargaining chip. I pulled my hand back, not harsh, but enough. "Your mother," I said slowly, "would have told you to get jobs." Ryan barked a laugh, sharp and ugly. "Jobs? I'm an entrepreneur, Rob." He never called me Dad, always Rob, like I was just some guy. "I create jobs." 3 failed startups in 5 years, a cryptocurrency disaster, a consulting firm that never consulted anyone, every one of them bankrolled by me. I glanced again at the fridge. Ethan's rocket ship, Lily's family picture, the innocence of 2 kids caught in the middle of their parents' greed. My stomach twisted. Their future was being gambled away like chips on a poker table. Olivia's voice cracked. She touched the pearls again, dabbing at her eyes, though I saw no real tears. "Daddy, think about your grandchildren. Think about their schools, their future. Please, we just need this one last time." One last time. I'd heard that before, too many times. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and looked at them both. Ryan with his glass of my bourbon, Olivia with her crocodile tears and designer handbag, my daughter and her parasite. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm even, but each word carried weight. "You know," I said, "people can call me a lot of things. A fool, a soft touch, a man who doesn't know when to say no. But don't you ever," I let the silence hang just long enough, "don't you ever mistake me for a walking wallet." Olivia blinked, stunned. Ryan set his glass down harder than he meant to. For the first time that night, I had their full attention. I stood, steadying myself, the migraine settling into a cold clarity. "Tomorrow," I said. "Come back tomorrow, noon." Ryan's lips curled into a smirk like he thought he'd won. Olivia's shoulders relaxed with false relief. They had no idea. As I walked them to the door, I glanced again at Ethan's rocket and Lily's purple crayon family. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just about money. This was about legacy, about the future, about teaching a lesson I should have taught years ago. When the door shut behind them, the silence returned. Heavy but different this time, not the silence of grief or of loneliness. This silence was sharper, focused, because I'd already made my decision. And that, right there, was the moment everything changed. So let me ask you, what would you do? If your own child stood on your porch demanding almost $1 million, would you give in? Or would you finally say, enough? Stay with me, because what happened next, no one in my family ever saw coming. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked slowly above me. The house was dark, the kind of quiet that lets every memory crawl out of the corners of your mind. My mind wandered back, as it always did, to all the times I'd opened my wallet for Olivia and Ryan. Times I told myself it was for the right reasons. Times I convinced myself it was just this once. There was the startup fiasco, Ryan's grand idea to build some app that was supposed to change the way people shop. He came in with slides and buzzwords, waving his hands like some Silicon Valley prodigy. Olivia smiled so big that day, her eyes sparkling like she'd found herself married to the next Steve Jobs. I wanted her to keep that smile, so I wrote the check. 100,000 gone in 6 months. The app never even launched. Then came the house. A beautiful place in Westlake with a kitchen island bigger than my first garage. They didn't have the down payment, of course, but they needed to act fast before someone else grabbed it. So, once again, Dad came to the rescue. I signed the papers, moved money around, and made it happen. Olivia hugged me so tight that day I could still feel her perfume on my shirt when I went to bed that night. She whispered, "Thank you, Daddy, this is the last time, I promise." It wasn't the last time. The tuition bills came next, private school for Ethan and Lily. "They need the best," she said, and I agreed. Kids deserve opportunities. I thought I was investing in their future, but somewhere in the mess, I forgot to ask who was investing in their character. Every single time she promised it was the last. Every single time I believed her. Because a father wants to believe his daughter, that's the trick of it. But I wasn't blind. I kept records. Every loan, every transfer, every cent that left my account in the name of family. Stacked neatly in binders with signatures, contracts Ryan had put his name on in that sloppy scrawl of his. I wasn't stupid. People think fathers like me are fools, but we're not. We know. We just hope. We hope one day our kids will wake up, look us in the eye, and say, "You were right, Dad. I should have listened." I walked into my office and pulled one of those binders down. The weight of it almost made me laugh. The red tab marked 2019 stuck out. Inside, copies of checks, notarized agreements, my daughter's life written in numbers and dates. $500,000 already. And now they wanted more, almost double. I set the binder down next to a framed picture. Olivia on her wedding day, eyes filled with hope, her white dress catching the sunlight like she was glowing. She looked like her mother that day. Linda had been gone almost 10 years, but I swear she was standing right there in that picture, smiling. And right beside it, pinned on the corkboard, was a stack of unpaid invoices, credit cards, utility bills. The mortgage I was quietly covering when Ryan forgot to. The contrast nearly broke me. On one side, a daughter full of promise. On the other, a pile of debt that smelled like gasoline waiting for a match. That was the weight pressing down on me. The burden of a father. It's not just about money, it's about the gnawing question, am I saving her or am I ruining her? Because here's the truth I wrestled with. If I said no, Ethan and Lily would feel the sting. Their school, their home, their sense of stability, it could all crumble. And what kind of grandfather lets his grandchildren suffer? But if I said yes, if I wrote yet another check, Olivia would sink further into the hole she and Ryan had dug. She'd never learn. She'd keep reaching for my hand instead of finding her own footing. I stood there, staring at those two images, her wedding photo and the bills, the promise and the price. And for the first time, I let myself say it out loud. I don't know if I'm helping you anymore or if I'm just helping you stay broken. The words hung heavy in the air as if Linda herself had whispered back, finally. See, that's the thing about being a father. You carry a load that never really lifts. It changes shape, it shifts, but it never goes away. You balance love against responsibility, mercy against discipline. And in that balance, sometimes you lose yourself. That night, I felt the scale tipping. I knew then that no matter what choice I made, something would break. The question was, would it be my wallet or would it be my daughter's illusions? And maybe, for the first time, I started to wonder if letting something break was the only way to build anything back. Ryan swirled the bourbon in his glass, leaned back in my chair, and finally dropped the line I'd been waiting for. His voice was low, measured, but carried the kind of weight you can't mistake. "This isn't bank debt, Rob. This is with people you don't want to mess with." I froze just for a second. He wasn't bluffing. I'd heard that tone before, in the garage years ago, when a customer owed too much money to the wrong hands and suddenly his tires were slashed, his windows busted. You learn quick that some debts don't come with reminders in the mail. They come with knocks on your door in the middle of the night. Ryan leaned forward, eyes locking on mine, daring me to flinch. "If you don't cover this, it won't just be us paying the price. You think word won't get out. You think your little reputation in this town means anything to those guys." He smirked. "They'll drag you down right along with us." I felt my chest tighten. Not fear, not exactly. More like rage pushing against my ribs, begging to get out. He was threatening me in my own living room, with my own drink in his hand, sitting in the chair where I'd once read bedtime stories to Olivia. And then Olivia. God, she leaned in, her eyes wide, her voice breaking like some bad soap opera actress. "Daddy, please don't let him scare you. We're desperate." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo. I knew it instantly. Her and me back when she was maybe 6. I had her piggyback on my shoulders at the county fair, both of us grinning like fools, cotton candy in her hands. On the bottom, in her crooked handwriting, she'd written, "Daddy and me." She slid it across the table like it was evidence in some trial. "Remember this. You always told me I'd be your little girl no matter what. You said you'd never let anything happen to me." That's when my jaw clenched so tight I thought I'd crack a molar, because she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't showing me that picture to remember better days. She was weaponizing my own love against me, and she knew it might work. I forced myself to breathe slow, steady. On the outside, I kept my face calm. On the inside, I was a volcano ready to blow. Ryan sat back, satisfied, sipping my bourbon like he'd already won. Olivia dabbed her eyes, but I noticed the tears weren't real. She always did that thing, blinking too fast, touching her pearls, trying to sell the performance. Maybe she even believed it herself. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I let the silence stretch. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred, not from tears, but from the heat building behind my eyes. Finally, I pushed the picture back across the table. My hand didn't shake. My voice came out flat, colder than I intended. "Fine, tomorrow, noon, I'll take care of it." Ryan's smirk spread into a full grin. He tapped his glass on the table like a gambler calling his shot. "Knew you'd come around." Olivia reached for my hand, whispering, "Thank you, Daddy. I knew you'd understand." I stood up before she could touch me again. "Get out," I said quietly. Ryan chuckled. "Relax, Rob. We'll be back tomorrow. You can sleep on it." "Out," I repeated, this time sharp enough to cut through the act. They gathered their things, Ryan smug, Olivia relieved, and walked out. The door clicked shut, but the echo lingered. I turned, scanning the room, and my eyes caught the open doorway to the den. On the floor in the corner sat Ethan's tiny soccer cleats, one untied, caked with dried mud from last Saturday's game. Just sitting there, forgotten, waiting for him. I swallowed hard. Those shoes belonged to a boy who still believed his parents were heroes. A boy who didn't know yet that his dad gambled with other people's money and his mom twisted love into leverage. And in that moment I made a promise. Not to Olivia, not to Ryan, but to those kids. I whispered it out loud, my voice rough in the empty room. "I'll protect you, even if it means burning this whole circus down." The silence answered me, heavy and certain. They thought they'd trapped me. They thought they had me cornered. But they'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't just some old man with a checkbook. I was their father. And tomorrow they'd find out what that really meant. The house was dead quiet after they left, but my chest was pounding like I just finished a 10-round fight. I poured what was left of my bourbon down the sink because I knew if I sat there with another glass, I'd lose my nerve. Instead, I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Harvey Clark, my old Army buddy, now my lawyer. The man who'd pulled me out of more than one mess back in the day. He picked up on the second ring. "Tom, it's late. What's wrong?" "They finally crossed the line," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He didn't ask who they were. He knew. Harvey had seen the pattern for years, me bailing them out, writing checks, believing the promises. He'd warned me more times than I could count, and every time I'd waved him off. Not this time. "All right," he said, already in work mode. "What do you need from me?" "Everything we've been keeping in the drawer," I said. "The deed, the loan agreements, every record with Ryan's signature. I want it all pulled together tonight." "Understood." I hung up, and for the first time in years I felt a strange kind of calm. Not peace exactly, something colder. A steel spine where guilt used to be. I went to the safe in my office. Combination still smooth under my fingers. Inside were 2 decades of papers I'd guarded like a second heartbeat. Deeds, titles, contracts, checks I'd written when I should have said no. And right on top, the agreement Ryan had signed a year back, his promise that this would be the last time he asked for help. A promise as empty as his startups. Next, I pulled the USB from the little black box connected to the cameras. Every word, every smirk, every crocodile tear from tonight caught in crisp detail. Proof. Not that I needed it, but someday maybe the kids would. And I wasn't going to let their memories be rewritten by their parents' lies. I found a plain cardboard box in the garage, one of those Amazon leftovers nobody pays attention to. Perfect. Inside, I placed 3 neat stacks. First, the deed proving the house was mine alone. Second, the loan history with Ryan's bold signature scrawled at the bottom of every broken promise. Third, the USB drive labeled in my handwriting. On the flap I wrote, "For Olivia and Ryan tomorrow noon." No bow, no fancy wrapping. Just the truth, packed tight and waiting to explode. I set it by the front door where they couldn't miss it. And as I straightened up, I felt my back crack, the years in my bones reminding me just how long I'd been carrying them. Then I sat at the computer and booked a one-way ticket. 7 a.m., Austin to Lisbon, Portugal. Not Costa Rica, not the easy escape. I wanted oceans between us and a language they didn't speak. A place where my phone wouldn't buzz with demands, where I could sip coffee in the morning and not wonder what new disaster was headed my way. After the confirmation email dinged, I walked through the house like a man saying goodbye to a body before the coffin is closed. In the living room, the family portrait still hung on the wall. Olivia at 18, beaming in her graduation gown. Ryan standing too close, already with that slick smile. Me with my arm around her, proud and blind. I took it down. The glass was cold against my hands. I turned it over and pressed it back to the wall, the blank backside staring out like a mirror with no reflection. Somehow, it felt truer than the smiling faces. Upstairs, I paused by Ethan's room. His soccer cleats were still in the corner, grass stains dried on the laces. Lily's crayon drawings covered the mini fridge stick figures with Grandpa written in big shaky letters. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to look at them, because this wasn't about punishing kids. This was about cutting their parents off before the rot spread any further. I whispered into the dark just to anchor myself. Tomorrow, they'll get their gift, but it won't be the one they are expecting. I switched off the lights, locked the door, and let the house settle into silence. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm breaks. Right at noon, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks like they owned the place. Olivia and Ryan stood on the porch, dressed like they were headed to a boardroom instead of a shakedown. Olivia's sunglasses covered half her face, but I could see the smirk pulling at the corner of her mouth. Ryan clutched that fancy briefcase of his, empty, waiting to be stuffed with my money. Only this time the gift waiting for them wasn't what they expected. They spotted the box right away, sitting square on the table by the door. Just an ordinary cardboard box, tape across the top, their names scrawled in black marker, for Olivia and Ryan tomorrow noon. Olivia bent down first. She laughed softly, like she couldn't believe how easy it had been. "See, I told you he'd fold." Ryan ripped the tape with his car key, the impatience of a man who thought the world still owed him another jackpot. The first paper slid out, and I wish I could have seen the exact second their smugness cracked. Olivia froze, her eyes darting back and forth across the page. This isn't right," she whispered. But it was right. Right there in black and white, the deed to the house they bragged about to their friends. Signed and recorded in my name alone. Ryan snatched it from her, his face turning red. "No, this has to be fake. He can't. This place, this is ours." But his voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time in a long time, I think he knew he wasn't holding all the cards. Olivia's hands trembled as she reached for the next stack. It was heavier, thicker, 8 years of receipts, transfers, and loan agreements. Each page stamped, signed, numbered. Every time they'd promised, "Just this once, Dad," laid bare in one neat packet. The total at the bottom circled in red ink. $1, $198,432. Not a gift, not charity. A ledger of their greed. Her face crumpled. She whispered, "Oh my God." Ryan didn't stop. He kept digging faster now, like maybe he'd find the miracle check hidden underneath. Instead, out slid glossy photos, him at the casino. Him leaning over a blackjack table, sweat on his forehead, chips piled high and then gone. One after another, time-stamped proof of where my money had really gone. "Who took these?" Ryan barked, holding them up like the photos themselves had betrayed him, but he already knew. He'd been followed, documented, outplayed. Then came the USB. Olivia plugged it into her laptop right there on the porch, her hands shaky, Ryan breathing hard behind her. The video popped up. My living room just last night. His voice clear as day. "This isn't bank debt. These are people you don't want to mess with." Her voice, high and rehearsed, holding up that childhood photo. "Daddy, you promised you'd never let anything happen to me." And then the silence when I finally told them to leave. Neighbors had started peeking over fences, pausing on sidewalks. Mrs. Landry from across the street stood there with her little dog, watching like it was the evening news. Someone else had their phone out, already recording. Olivia's sobs broke through the quiet cul-de-sac. Not the polite little tears she'd faked the night before, but the kind that shake your whole body. Ryan cursed under his breath, slamming the briefcase on the concrete so hard the latch snapped off. And just when they thought they'd hit the bottom, Olivia found the last envelope. Smaller. Her name wasn't on it. Neither was Ryan's. In my handwriting, it simply read, "For Ethan and Lily." She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, 2 short pages. My words to the only innocents in this whole mess. To my grandchildren, you will always have your tuition covered until you turn 18. You are not to blame for the mistakes of your parents. I love you and I will never let you go without. Grandpa, the paper slipped from her hands. For the first time, Olivia wasn't just crying for herself. Her knees buckled and she sat right there on the porch, mascara streaking down her face, clutching at that letter like it was the last rope left to hold. Ryan tried to yank it from her, but the neighbors saw. Phones angled, whispers buzzing. That's the Reed's daughter, right? Crying on her dad's porch. One man muttered, about time someone stood up to them. Another said, public shame does what money never could. By then, Olivia wasn't even trying to hide. She rocked back and forth, sobbing into her hands, surrounded by evidence of every lie, every manipulation, every dollar wasted. And Ryan, he stormed off down the driveway, cursing, shouting, fists clenched but powerless. The box sat between them, ordinary cardboard holding the weight of 8 years' truth. And above it all, the cameras blinked red, capturing every second, not for me. I didn't need proof anymore, but for them. So they'd never again be able to tell themselves they hadn't been warned. And as they fell apart under the midday sun, I was already 30,000 feet in the air, headed east, finally free. By the end of that week, the fallout was complete. The credit card stopped working first. Olivia tried swiping at a boutique downtown, declined. The Nordstrom card declined. Even her Starbucks app, which she lived on, came up empty. She didn't know it yet, but every account tied to my name had been frozen at midnight. Every tap, every swipe, every it'll just go through returned nothing but embarrassment. Ryan didn't take it well. He stormed around their house like a trapped animal, slamming doors, cursing under his breath, blaming everyone but himself. At one point, he hurled his briefcase against the wall, papers scattering everywhere. Then he stuffed a duffel bag with whatever he could grab, designer sneakers, watches, that gold chain he thought made him look successful, and then he was gone. No note, no goodbye to the kids, just the roar of his car peeling out of the driveway. Nobody's seen him since. For Olivia, reality landed harder. The eviction notices came next. Mortgage unpaid, late fees stacking up. The same neighbors who once envied her Instagram-perfect life now whispered when she dragged trash bags of clothing to the pawn shop. The Mercedes disappeared from the driveway, repossessed. Slowly, one by one, the trappings of that Westlake lifestyle vanished. By the end of the month, she'd sold the crystal stemware, the leather couch, even her wedding dress. All of it just to scrape together enough for rent on a tiny 2-bedroom apartment off Riverside. A place with peeling paint, humming window units, and coin laundry in the basement. She and the kids squeezed into that space like it was a punishment cell compared to what they'd known. And the kids, Ethan and Lily, they were the only part that twisted my heart. Their private school tuition was still covered because I'd promised them, not their parents, but everything else changed overnight. No more weekend trips to Cabo. No more designer backpacks or after-school horseback lessons. It was public school friends, PB&J sandwiches, and hand-me-down shoes. Funny thing is, kids adapt faster than adults. They didn't care about the missing iPads or the downgraded vacations. They just wanted stability. And Olivia, for the first time in her life, had to provide it on her own. She took a job at a clothing store. Retail hours, minimum wage, folding jeans, and standing behind a register for 8-hour shifts. A woman who once bragged about never working a day in her life now bagged purchases for teenagers spending their allowance. And then came the photo. An old college friend spotted her one afternoon, standing at the register in a plain black polo, hair tied back, scanning barcodes. The friend snapped a picture and posted it online with the caption, "From Westlake princess to retail worker, how the mighty fall." It spread fast, shared, mocked, dissected in group chats across town. People who used to flatter her now laughed behind her back. Customers walked in whispering, "Isn't that Olivia Reed?" She smiled through it, but inside it broke something in her. This was the collapse in full view, not just financial, but social, emotional. The golden couple of Westlake stripped down to nothing. Ryan vanished like smoke, Olivia exposed under fluorescent lights, and the kids learning resilience the hard way. And yet in that collapse, a strange kind of truth settled in. She could no longer hide behind borrowed wealth or my checkbook. Every shift she clocked in, every dollar she earned was hers, maybe for the first time in her life. Life had finally given Olivia what I never could, a mirror, and she didn't like what she saw. If you've ever watched someone hit bottom, you know it's both brutal and necessary. And that's why I'll ask you, where do you draw the line between love and enabling? Between saving someone and letting them save themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really like to hear what you think. Lisbon greeted me with cobblestone streets and the sound of church bells echoing across the hills. The air smelled of fresh bread from corner bakeries, and the mornings were cool enough to remind me I was still alive, still moving. I found a small apartment overlooking a square where old men played chess and children chased pigeons. My days started slow, long walks up narrow alleys, a cup of strong coffee at a cafe where no one knew my name, and afternoons sitting by the river watching the boats drift past. For the first time in years, I could breathe without waiting for the next phone call, the next demand, the next "Daddy, we need you." My health came back too. Blood pressure easing down, sleep stretching through the night without that tight knot in my chest. I didn't realize until then how much carrying them had aged me. I wasn't young anymore, but Lisbon made me feel like I still had a little left to live. But even oceans away, Olivia never left my mind. No father can just switch that off. One morning, I sat at the little wooden desk by the window, sunlight pouring in, and I began to write. My hand shook a little, but the words came easier than I thought. Olivia, I've spent too many years confusing love with rescue. I thought giving you money was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from seeing you struggle. And that was my mistake. I raised you on comfort instead of discipline, and it robbed you of lessons you should have learned long ago. That's on me. I paused, staring at the page. The next part was harder, but I knew it had to be said. Love without respect is nothing more than pity. And pity isn't what I want between us. If you want my love, it will always be there. But if you want my respect, you'll have to earn it, not with apologies, not with tears, but with the way you live your life. If you want to stand tall, you'll have to do it on your own 2 feet. I leaned back, hearing Linda's voice in my head, soft but firm, the way she used to guide me. I added one last line, the kind I hoped would stay with her long after I was gone. If you want your father's love, stand up. If you want his respect, work with your hands. Only then will you know both were always yours to have. I sealed the letter and mailed it the same afternoon. Weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend back in Austin. They said Olivia had opened the letter in that little apartment she'd been forced into, with the kids asleep in the next room. She sat at the kitchen table, reading it once, then twice, then folding it against her chest. For the first time, she didn't cry because she was cornered or embarrassed. She cried because she finally understood. The letter didn't solve everything. It wasn't magic, but it was the first brick in a foundation she'd never had to lay before. And sometimes, the hardest lesson a parent can give is the one where you finally step aside and let your child learn how to walk again, this time without holding their hand. It had been a full year since I left. Lisbon had given me new lungs, new mornings, and a quiet that felt like medicine. But sooner or later, every father knows he has to come home, not to rescue, not to clean up the past, but to see if anything real had grown from the wreckage. Back in Austin, life looked smaller. The house was long sold, the neighborhood buzz replaced by a quieter rhythm. One gray afternoon, I ducked into a department store to pick up a shirt. I wasn't looking for anyone, but fate doesn't ask permission. "Hi, can I help you with anything?" a voice said. I turned and there was Olivia. No makeup mask, no pearls, no performance. Just a plain black blouse, a name tag clipped to her chest, and eyes that carried more miles than the years should have allowed. For a moment, she froze. Then slowly she smiled, not the rehearsed kind she'd used to get what she wanted, but a smile stripped down to its bones, a real one. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice cracked on that single word. I walked toward her, and for the first time in a long time there was no wall between us. She looked down at her hands, calloused now, nails chipped from work. "I've been trying," she said. "It's not much, but I'm earning my way for the kids, for myself." I reached into my coat and pulled out an envelope. She frowned, cautious, maybe thinking it was another check. But when she opened it, her eyes widened. Inside was a contract, a position at a nonprofit I'd helped fund overseas, teaching financial literacy to teenagers, showing them the lessons she'd only learned the hard way. Her lip trembled. "Dad, I don't know if I deserve this." I shook my head. "It's not about deserving, it's about becoming. You've already taken the hardest step, standing on your own feet. This isn't a handout, Olivia, it's a handoff." She swallowed hard, then nodded, and in that moment she said yes without words. We stood there in the middle of that department store under the fluorescent lights and rows of discounted sweaters, and finally, she leaned into me. I wrapped my arms around her, and it wasn't the stiff, polite hug of the past. It was real, flesh and blood, father and daughter. A reunion stripped of money, stripped of bargaining. Just two people who had finally learned how to meet in the middle. And here's the truth I want you to take with you. Sometimes the greatest gift a father can give isn't money or shelter or rescue. Sometimes it's the space for a child to stumble, fall, and finally learn how to stand tall on their own, because only then do they discover their own strength, and only then does respect come alive. So let me ask you, where do you draw the line between love and enabling? If you were in my shoes, would you keep saving them, or would you let them learn the hard way? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.